Hi, my name is State Representative Tommy Vitolo, and I want to share with you some information about the upcoming town election. But before I do, I want to make sure you know how to get in touch with me. 617-872-8921 is my telephone number. Call me anytime. Or you can send me an email at tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. Now, about the upcoming election, it's on Tuesday, June 9th. It was pushed back from May this year because of the coronavirus. And the idea was to give us a little more time to get ready for the election and understand how the coronavirus will impact our society. We've got our hands around it at least a little bit, and we've got an election coming up. We'll be voting on select board members, school committee members, library trustees, a member of the housing board, and town meeting members. And to learn about all the candidates, you can go here, tommyvitolo.com/2020 Brookline candidates. I've put up their photos, I've put up their endorsements, and I've put up their responses to the League of Women Voter questionnaire, so you can compare all of the candidates all in one place. You can also see if they have a web page or a Twitter feed or something like that. Again, tommyvitolo.com/2020 Brookline candidates for all of the candidates in this June 9th election. There are a couple of ways you can vote. The way that I'm really excited about is you can vote by mail. You don't need an excuse. The state legislature passed and the governor signed a bill allowing everyone to be able to vote by mail. And the way you do that is you get yourself a 2020 municipal election early ballot application. And you fill it out, including the signature at the bottom. Now, this is really important. If you don't have a printer, that's okay. You can actually just handwrite all of this information and mail it in. Your name, your legal voting residence, your date of birth, your phone number and email address if you have them, where you would like the ballot mailed to, and if you have any special circumstances, like you require assistance to fill it out due to a disability. If you do, the assisting person's name and their address, and you've got to sign and date it. And then you've got to mail it back. Where do you mail it? You mail it to the town clerk's office at this address, P.O. Box 470806, Brookline, Mass. 02447. So you take that application that you've signed, or you hand wrote the whole thing, and you mail it to the town clerk's office, P.O. Box 470860, Brookline, Mass. 02447. And do it soon, because the election is Tuesday, June 9th. If you want to know where to get that form, you can get it here, tommyvitolo.com/vote by mail. Go to that page and you can click and pull the form right up, where you can print it or copy it and get it in the mail. And when you get it in the mail, the town is going to mail you an envelope that looks like this. This is my ballot, and I haven't opened it yet. So it says, read all instructions before voting. I will do that. I've made sure it's the one addressed to me and not to my lovely wife. When you open it up, you find inside, it's very exciting. You find that you get a few things. You get a return envelope, very important. This envelope does require a stamp, so you need to put your stamp on, and you need to make sure you address it to the correct town. Of course, that's Brookline, P.O. Box 470860, Brookline, Mass. 02447. And what you want to do is you want to read the instructions, of course, which are here. Read them carefully. And ultimately, what you end up doing is you fill out your ballot. Here is my ballot. I live in precinct 6, so my ballot looks like this. Yours may look a little different with different town meeting member candidates. You fill that out, and you end up putting it in this envelope, which you sign and write your name on, and make sure that you fill out all of this correctly and seal it. And then you put it in this envelope. You get that stamp on it, first class, and you get it back right away, because it needs to be received by the town by Tuesday, June 9th, the day of the election. I encourage you to vote by mail. Because of coronavirus, we do want to reduce our interactions within 6 feet, and we want to keep those who are civil servants and others working with folks every day as safe as possible, and that means limiting interaction. So if you can vote by mail, I encourage you to do so. But you can still vote in person. However, there are a number of important changes to our election day this year on Tuesday, June 9th. The first important change is that the polls are open from noon until 8 p.m. I'll say it again. The polls open at noon and close at 8 p.m. sharp. You must be in line by 8 p.m. for your vote to count. And that's on Tuesday, June 9th. 4 polling locations have moved because they are in places where we don't want the increased traffic. 3 are our apartment buildings, and the 4th is a fire station. So if you live in precinct 3, you would normally vote at 90 Longwood Avenue, but now for this election, you're going to vote at the Coolidge Corner School, and that's the Stedman Street entrance. If you live in precinct 7, you would typically vote at 61 Park Street, but on June 9th, you're going to vote in person at the Brookline High School Schluntz Gym. Similarly, if you live in precinct 10, you would normally vote at 190 Harvard Street, but you also would vote at the Brookline High School Schluntz Gym. And finally, if you would typically vote in precinct 15 and you want to vote on election day rather than use the mail-in, you would typically vote at the fire station at 962 Hammond Street, but instead you're going to want to go to Baker School to the lower level cafeteria. And that's how you can vote in person on Tuesday, June 9th from noon to 8 p.m. Lastly, and this is really important, we need poll workers to work all of these polls. And many of the workers, if you voted in the past, you recognize are older adults. And those are folks who may not be so interested in working on this particular election. And so if you have Tuesday, June 9th available from about 10:30 in the morning until 8:30 or so p.m., whole time, you can't do a half a shift, you could be a poll worker. It pays $175 and comes with lunch and some PPEs to keep you safe. If you think that might be a good thing for you to do some civic duty, go to tommyvitolo.com/poll worker, and you can read about what the requirements are and what the benefits are to decide if that's something that works for you. If so, please let the town clerk's office know immediately. As I said, they're really looking for poll workers. So once again, the election is Tuesday, June 9th. You can vote by mail. You can vote in person. You can go to tommyvitolo.com/2020 Brookline candidates to make sure that you have a chance to read up about all of the candidates. And it's critical that you vote. If you are eligible to vote in Brookline, I implore you to do so. It's so important. Thanks for watching Brookline Interactive Group, and thanks for participating in our town. Hi, and welcome. We're here today with Eric Hyett, who's running for Select Board. As you know, there are 3 candidates for 2 positions, and so we've got ourselves a race. As I've said many times, and I'll keep saying, the election is June 9th. And the other thing I never miss an opportunity to remind folks of is how to get in touch with me. Tommy Vitolo, 617-872-8921 for COVID-related issues and other issues. If there's anything that I can do for you at the State House, I want to try to get that done. Tommy.vitolo@mahouse.gov. But really, Eric, this is about you. You're running for the Select Board. You are a long-time resident of the town, but relatively new to elected politics. So how did you come about deciding that Select Board is where the town would best use your skills?
Thanks, Tommy. It's been a bit of a journey. I'm kind of excited. This campaign was born of my involvement in the town over the past 12 years. But I want to go back a little bit earlier to that. I did grow up in Brookline, as you mentioned. I went to Driscoll, Brookline High School. So, I mein, in a way, I feel like I should be the ultimate Brookline insider. But in the campaign, I've been cast as kind of a Brookline outsider. So it's been an interesting dichotomy for me. I moved back to Brookline 12 years ago. I had a 25-year career in global business development. I served as a contract negotiator for Microsoft. I was based in Tokyo, and I speak Japanese as well as a few other languages. I moved back to Brookline 12 years ago and have been really involved in local issues ever since. Um, I earn my living as a Japanese translator. I'm a renter. I have an apartment on Beacon Street. I live with my boyfriend, Teddy Weinberg. If I'm elected, I'll actually be the town's first openly gay select board member. I know Brookline loves its first, so that would definitely be a first. My passion for the select board position came from my involvement with the most vulnerable communities in our town. I was teaching ESL at the library. The Brookline Library has this magical ESL program. And I was lucky enough to do that for a few years and get involved with the wonderful volunteers in that program. But more importantly, I started to understand that there are people in Brookline that are, although we're perceived as a rich town, that are neither rich nor feeling particularly included. That includes our immigrant communities. For the past 4 years, I've co-taught with Abby Erdman, who was my high school English teacher from Brookline High School. She taught there for 43 years. Abby and I co-teach a class that's sponsored by the Town of Brookline Office of Diversity, Inclusion, and Community Relations. The town is called Telling Your Story. And my students in that class are all Brookline moms, mothers. They all work full-time and they live in BHA housing. So I started to hear, I mean, I'm a writer myself, I write memoir. I started to hear really very compelling stories from my students about feeling excluded in Brookline. And this is a theme that just kept coming up. My mom got pushed out of Brookline. She lived on Mason Terrace for 43 years and was a huge contributor to the town in so many meaningful ways, in the arts, in terms of nature, in terms of building community, progressive politics. And she just couldn't afford to hang on as her property tax and maintenance costs kept going up. She just couldn't afford to stay in Brookline. So now that's three groups, right? Seniors, immigrants, people of color, low-income residents that I all feel are just experiencing a high level of exclusion in this town. Mm-hmm. That is what drove me into the race, was a sense that, wow, there is a body that has the power to change some of this. The body is called Select Board. I consulted with some of my close friends who serve on town meeting. I have two close college friends, Michael Burstein and Robert Liao, both of whom have served on town meeting. Michael Burstein is still on town meeting and he's our library trustee as well. And they both said, you shouldn't join town meeting, just run for select board. Those guys know me, they know I'm an executive. I'm seeking an executive position. They said, Eric, honestly, what's the point? Like, there's no stipulation that you be a legislator in order to become an executive. You're a good executive. You have a long track record of like doing stuff. And you have a huge track record of caring about Brookline. Those guys encouraged me to seek the select board position. I thought about it, but I didn't do anything. Then I thought a little bit more. Then two things happened that drove me into the race. One of them was town meeting's decision last year to not raise the salary for select board members. I thought that was a mistake. I mean, I know there's good people on both sides of the decision, but as far as I'm concerned, when I talk to my, the current select board members, they tell me it's like 30 hours a week to do that job of their time at a minimum. Recently, it's probably been more than that. So that means the select board pay comes out to $2.44 an hour. To me, that was an indication that something was wrong, that Brookline wasn't putting enough priority on inclusion in its leadership, because the type of people that can work for $2.44 an hour excluded all of my students in Telling Your Story. I asked them would they like to run instead of me. I said, look, if any of you wants to run, I'll back your campaign. And they're like, Eric, we honestly can't work for $2.44 an hour. So that was one decision. And then the real thing that drove me into the race was this 4-1 vote to pursue the appeal against firefighter Gerald Alston. I think the case reflects badly on Brookline. It's been around a long, long time, and the case needs to end. So I feel that Select Board is the only body with the power at this point to end that case. So it is out of my concern for what I can't call anything other than Brookline values. My campaign slogan is not me, but we. That was painted on the walls of Driscoll during my childhood. Those are words that were taught to me by the Brookline schools, words of inclusion and thinking about community. Those are what I refer to as Brookline values. And I feel that the town's gotten a little bit out of whack. So I guess that's what drove me into the select board race. I'll finally, last topic about that. Why aren't there more candidates? If our system is supposedly so great, then why couldn't we get other people to run for it? This job is so thankless, so terrible, so many hours. I watched Select Board this week. It was like 5 hours and 45 minutes on a Tuesday night. You know, even the best civil servant is going to become disheartened toward the end of a meeting of that kind of length and duration. Like week after week of just grueling meetings. So yeah, I mean, I'm not in this for the glamour. I'm in it to try to change the nature of the job, to like broaden the inclusion and to put these kind of conversations first.
There's a wonderful
one more thing,
irony.
the select board gets to appoint the members of all committees. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying there's a wonderful irony of you're running for select board because it didn't get the pay raise, right? There's this irony there. It doesn't pay enough, so I want it. But I get it. It's about making the change. I want to go back to inclusion, right? You talked about the Gerald Alston 4-1 vote on how to handle the case. You mentioned inclusion in several ways earlier, and certainly conversations around inclusion have been raised locally, across the state, nationally. It's becoming a thing that more and more people are waking up to the idea of, but certainly there's a wide spectrum of understanding and empathy, and certainly there's even a vocabulary around the idea of inclusion. But it certainly sounds like something you've been thinking about a lot. Who are your look, I'll tell you what I see, right? You told us you were gay, but you're a white dude, right? And so when we talk about inclusion, as another white dude, it's not so easy to empathize. It's possible to sympathize, but how do you find out? Who do you listen to? How do you know what's important and what might be something that's not for right now? How do you navigate this?
You've asked the absolute best, most important question, which is how to be a white ally. I try to aspire to be a white ally to our communities of color, and they need white allies right now. Specifically, let's say Asian Americans have been unfairly targeted during the COVID pandemic with threats of violence, even like right around the corner from us in Brookline here. There have been violent threats, abusive words, and even physical violence against Asians in our community. So to me, I can't know what it's like to walk around Brookline being Asian, but I can be a white ally to that community. It's the same with anybody else. We can't know each other's experiences of exclusion. If I told you the number of times that I've been excluded or stepped on account of being gay, like I could tell you that and you could empathize with me, but you can't know what it's like day after day. So I'm hoping that each of us can bring our own experiences to the table to try to show empathy, and more importantly, to take action. And that's really what I'm about here, is not just leading with compassion, but with pragmatism and actually doing something about these systemic problems. And I'm really sad that Brookline has been unwilling to take a look at itself. It took the State Civil Service Commission's lengthy report, and they really, really laid into the town for being handling things very poorly with that case. If I were in charge at the time, I would have voted with Raul Fernandez to end the town's appeal, accept the judgment, and try to learn the lessons and move forward. And again, I'm saying this as a white ally. I can't know what it's like to be Black, and I'm not pretending I can.
And so you mentioned Select Board Member Fernandez, perhaps as someone who has taken the kinds of actions that you see yourself taking as a Select Board member. Do you have other folks who you're looking to for guidance, or even just to sort of emulate their leadership style or their set of values?
Yes, I do. I mean, well, you're one of them. I've definitely, and I tell people that I really appreciate the work that you've done.
Thank you.
I watched the beautiful Type 9s roll by every day, these Green Line trains, which I've never gotten to ride because it's been a pandemic the entire time. And Teddy, my boyfriend, is a major, major transit nerd. He's like heartbroken not to have been able to enjoy the better signaling and the things that like I know that you helped us fight for. So you're one person that is on my list. Michael Burstein, who our town meeting member and library trustee, he's a model of ethics. And what Michael brought to Brookline, he's the one that brought the warrant article to change selectmen to select women. That was his warrant article, change Board of Selectmen to Board of Select Women. The article led to the town having a discussion and coming to the rational decision of choosing select board member. But it takes people like that to stand up and do something that is unique and challenging to the status quo. Town meeting member Deborah Brown, she's been my kind of spirit guide through this political process. She's a very, very sophisticated political person. She's very articulate and she's very passionate. And so I appreciate Deborah has really encouraged me to lead with a combination of pragmatism and compassion. And I really think we have people in our town government already leading that way. And of course, Raul Fernandez, I mean, he's my mentor in terms of the person I look up to the most. I can't identify, I went through the whole year's voting record of the select board. I can't identify a place where I would have voted differently than Raul Fernandez.
That's helpful. And so you mentioned 4 folks. I know all of them, right? Deborah, Michael, select board member Fernandez, and myself. And while I don't always agree with myself, the other 3 are model citizens. But they have different styles, different ways of going about making change. So tell us about what we would expect from you as a select board member in making that change that you envision happen. What is your style, your way of getting things done?
So, I mean, the people who know me well know that I'm a kind of a no BS guy. I do not enjoy long-winded discussions. I'm not much of a pontificator. I'm a poet. I write poetry and I publish it. And the goal of poetry is to get something said quickly and get out. So that my style is to not pontificate, but rather let's try to identify some actions that need to be taken. At the same time, I recognize that governing a lot of select board is about listening. So I would hope a tiny bit as a select board member to guide those that are presenting in a certain way to present their stuff in an efficient and quicker way so that the meetings don't have to go 5 hours and 45 minutes. In terms of my leadership style, I am a pragmatist. I mean, I like to dwell in reality. The best example is the COVID pandemic. This pandemic has been horrible for me personally. I almost can't even talk about it. But my mom lives in an Alzheimer's care facility in Newton. There are many COVID cases in the facility. I can see her only by virtual visit. Yeah. My brother and his entire family had COVID already. My brother was extremely sick with it. And so I get it about this pandemic. It's huge. But my leadership style in something like that is to dwell in reality and not in fiction, which means I'd like to have science inform our decisions. I made a public comment this week at Select Board. And again, I make brief public comments, like 30 seconds. I try to not waste their time. My comment said that I do not feel we're ready to use the word reopening. I think that word is tinged with all kinds of calculations that are not in the interest of our people. And that the word to use is safely mitigate the COVID pandemic, which we're right in smack in the middle of. Let's safely mitigate it. Let's take some steps to reduce harm on the most vulnerable. So I think language matters. I think the select board is one place where words really matter a lot. But also, if I have to make choices, I'd like to make them based on in the reality-based community informed by data. And I mean, I do think that there's a lot of emotions at play in the state and the countries and in our town's reaction to COVID. But we have to get more data in the mix.
So you bring up COVID. It's kind of a thing right now. Maybe by the time that the viewers see this in a few days, we'll already be past it and be back at 100%, but I doubt it. At the local level, we're going to see some real pain from a governance perspective. Obviously, members of the community are suffering in all kinds of different complex ways. But with respect to being a select board member, you're going to be, if elected, part of the leadership team that navigates us through. And I believe that in many ways, the blueprint for the town's values lie in the town's budget. Where we spend our money is really where our mouth is, and it's whether or not we mean for it to be. It's what determines our actions. So clearly, we're going to have less revenue in the coming fiscal year. State aid will likely go down. I'll do the best I can to hold it, but the state doesn't have the money either. And we're also going to see declines in parking meter revenue, in fines and fees. Marijuana tax revenue will have taken a hit. So what is your vision for working through this next fiscal year with a budget reduction in the millions of dollars? How do we make that work?
Well, there's good and bad news there. The good news is we don't yet know the size of the shortfall. We can agree it's going to be absolutely huge. But by not knowing that amount, it means we don't yet have to, fortunately, we're not yet at the moment of slashing giant portions of our budget. Before I would do that, I think the select board's first job is to try to make sure we've identified every penny of federal and state aid that's available. I know you're helping so much with the state aid, but there may be even more agencies, not just the legislature or direct aid to municipalities, but other grant programs, things that maybe we've been putting on the back burner that now's the time to kickstart just to get some money flowing into our local economy. We also have federal aid, and I mean, this is a disaster, so I'm looking for disaster relief. Brookline needs to treat this as a disaster. And I feel like that word needs to get used more, because if we have, if this were a hurricane, people would be like, okay, calling up FEMA demanding disaster relief. So we need as a municipality to admit that we can't patch all the holes in our own budget. What I won't be interested in is raising property taxes on low-income homeowners. So if we do decide as a town that it's time to raise taxes, through an override process, I would want it to adhere to the principles of the BFAC report, which means that the override would be well planned, well communicated, well understood, well thought through in advance. When finally it does come to making, if we have to, let's say there's a giant, multi-million-dollar shortfall in our budget, the decisions to cut programs are going to be very, very complicated. One of my fellow candidates at the incumbent, Heather Hamilton, today pointed out that the state does mandate that we pay for certain things. So Brookline may not have all the choices that we want to have in what to cut. That is going to be a very interesting series of conversations about what we're even allowed to cut versus what we truly have the discretion to make changes to. Now, I mean, some things may be able to change, to truly transform, like our library system. I trust Michael Burstein and the other library trustees will come up with a very new and interesting way to run libraries. It may end up actually saving money in the new system. The schools, right now it's going to cost more to make them safe, but in the long run, if we have some amount of remote learning, it may actually long-term lower our costs. The impacts of the changes that we make could long-term actually save Brookline money. We need to look at it that way and say, look, well, all right, this is the worst possible time for everything. So let's start planning for the future, which may come 2 years from now, maybe 2.5 till the pandemic is completely gone. I can't predict the time frame. But to me, now's the time to invest. I mean, I would say buy low, sell high. So if there's an opportunity for us to get some investment into Brookline right now, we should say yes to it. It's the time to make plans to increase our revenues, build new housing. That is basically how I answer that question. If somebody wants to come up with a good amount of data about precisely how much of our budget shortfall it looks like, I might even potentially consider borrowing to close that shortfall, because I believe in Brookline. And we're a AAA borrower, we're a wonderful town. Maybe we need to borrow a little money to get through this crisis. All kinds of households are making those decisions for themselves right now, and municipalities have the right to make those decisions too. I do consider all of those things before I would slash services, because otherwise what are we doing?
You mentioned housing. We haven't talked about housing at all today. And as you know, it's a complicated issue. Uh, there's no question the cost of housing has gone up tremendously in Brookline over the last 5, 10, 20 years. And, buy low, sell high. If you had already bought, um, that's music to your retirement's ears. But if you hadn't, if you are a renter or otherwise want to come to the town now, maybe you're a student at Boston University and you want to stay in the area. Housing obviously is incredibly expensive. And the flip side of that is a lot of folks really like where they live. They like it the way it is. And so it's hard for people in every neighborhood to imagine substantially more housing in their neighborhood because they like it the way it is now. And so how do you imagine having conversations around adding to the housing stock, and how do you bring people along either townwide or in that particular neighborhood that more housing makes this town a better place?
Well, let's start with a brief statistic. The current Brookline population is the same as it was in 1987 when I graduated from Brookline High School. The Brookline High School population is the same as it was in 1987 when I graduated from Brookline High School. And yet everyone is suddenly up in arms about too many people coming into Brookline. Almost literally no one has moved into Brookline if you measure it that way over 40 years, versus the growth of the Boston area has been tremendous. Our neighboring communities I admire that are well administered, like Newton, like Cambridge, like Boston, like Somerville, have all grown tremendously and absorbed that growth. Now, all four of those communities happen to be cities and Brookline happens to be a town, but I don't think it's our town style of government that's at fault. I think it's been a lack of will by Brookline to grow along with the times. So as we have stayed the same in terms of population, our population has grown older, has grown richer, has grown whiter, and has grown less economically exclusive. More economically exclusive. In other words, less diverse on the economic axis. If I'm really specific, when I was in high school, like the kids of the police force and the kids of Brookline teachers could live in Brookline, and now that's just not a possibility. So that's what that amounts to in sort of real world terms. It's created a worse community. The way to get a better community is to welcome more people into it. And we have to welcome the right kind of people. We need eco-friendly people. We need people who don't need a lot of cars. To me, that says senior citizens. I can't imagine a group more eco-friendly and less dependent on cars than seniors. That means building senior appropriate housing in places like Coolidge Corner. It means welcoming things like mixed use development. I don't know, that's been like a dirty word in Brookline for a long time, but it's time to have it. Where you have a single floor of retail and 2 floors, maybe 1 to 2 floors of housing above it. Something at scale, something livable. To the people who need Brookline to remain exactly the same, then I say, well, look, the town is on a path at that point that's really hard to get off of. It's on a path of exclusion, of economic exclusion. You'll end up with less and less and less interesting neighbors. Your town is simply going to get worse as it becomes only one type of person that can be able to live here. The quality of life will go down, goes down for everybody, and the tax base will go down as people stop being able to afford to live here with kids. So I think long-term, the best solution is to build a good amount of senior housing in transit accessible neighborhoods. I like Coolidge Corner. I live in Washington Square. This is a great place for seniors. Cleveland Circle, great place for seniors. And Brookline Village, great place for seniors. Why do I say that? Because they all have walkable like amenities, services, transportation, etc. I proposed an electric circulator bus to make Putterham Circle part of Brookline. Part of the much better connected, so that we run our own electric circulator bus frequently 7 days a week, kind of bring the town together. So I view Putterham and that whole area as a potential place to put some housing as well. I don't think there's any need to build housing where it's not desired or where it's not near transit. I think that's kind of, that'll drive the wrong behaviors anyway. But we do need a small amount of workforce housing that has to be built so that we can have some of what I had growing up here, which is that the people who police the town and the people who teach the kids of the town should be able to live here, at least some of them. And so we can't do that. It's never going to just magically appear. We have to take concrete action. We have to say yes to full development. We have to partner with nonprofit developers like the awesome project going up on Harvard Street right now. I mean, Brookline has the values, at least I hope that Brookline still has the values to do these things, but it just hasn't had the political will to put those things first. I kind of want to use this time of crisis when we're forced to reevaluate our priorities as a great time to say, look, how do we really repair a revenue hole is we grow new revenues over the next 5 years, 10 years, kind of repair it by growing.
Well, Eric, I want to thank you for giving us so much time to talk about why you're running for select board and what your vision is. And I wish you the best of luck. Folks, remember, Tuesday, June 9th is the election. Polls are open from noon to 8 p.m. And of course, you can vote by mail. I encourage you to do so. Thanks so much for watching Brookline Interactive Group and for learning about our guest today, select board candidate Eric Hyett. We'll see you on the flip side. Have a great one, everyone.